Welcome to the weekly podcast dedicated to amazing people with incredible journeys. But how did they get there? Who were the characters that impacted their stories? And how are they paying it forward now? Sit back and be inspired to go out and make a difference in the origin stories of the people you know, and even some that you don't. Welcome to the Prequel.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Prequel podcast. I am your host, Mike Azalina, and I am so excited to have you here for another episode of exploring the stories that make us who we are. We all have them, we're all writing them, and we kind of mix into each other's prequel along the way, helping each other write the amazing stories that we will leave behind when it is our time. So I am super pumped to have a very special guest today. This is someone who we've had to cancel 3 times because of me. Jaimie Beebe has been incredibly gracious, and I am super excited to finally have her on the show with us. So we'll be getting to her in a little bit. We'll tell you all about her once we get her into the studio. But as always, I like to start the episode with a story that I'm experiencing either in the moment or just prior to recording. So you can see the shirt that I'm wearing. Says Bobcat Nation, and I know that the blues don't match. I've been really struggling with this all morning. I do love to match my hats to my shirts. This one doesn't, and that's okay. We're going to do it for the intro. I'll change it for Jamie's episode, I promise. And the reason that I'm wearing it is because I'm heading to the school that I taught at for 8 years to visit, or not visit, but see my former second graders take their senior walk through the building. So we were the Brecht Bobcats. And this was a shirt that was one of our shirts, actually, the year that we participated in Dancing with the Streaks. 2-time Dancing with the Streaks champion. That's a story for another day. However, this is a shirt that a lot of the kids bought and wore, and staff bought and wore to the shows. And I kept it as a little piece of memory as I left Brecht to move on into administration. But this class, and I loved all of my classes. I learned something from each and every one of them. This class is really special to me because they went through the journey of wedding planning with me. Andrea and I were planning our wedding throughout the year that I had this group in second grade. And they were just like the perfect group for that year. And I also felt like I was coming into my own as a teacher. It was my 4th year teaching. I was finally feeling like I had my footing. And I experienced that with them. I was able to step out of my comfort zone with them. They were wise beyond their years, not just academically, but their senses of humor were all beyond their years. And I remember laughing with them so often at my own expense or our wedding story. They always wanted a story, and I think that's why I appreciated this class so much. It wasn't to get out of things, it was to relate to the things we were doing. I would bring something up, they'd be like, no, tell the story. And they were fine if I told them that I had to wait till after we were done. They just wanted to know the story. It didn't matter when it came or if it took up time academic. They just wanted to hear the story. And I appreciated this group because of that. They loved stories, but they also loved humor. And to this day, I still remember one of them holding, remember those like brain quest games that you had, like you would slide the paper over and it would have questions and you'd flip it and they have the answers. She was asking me them at an indoor recess once, and I was getting them all right, and she goes, "You've been alive for too long, Mr. A. You've been alive for too long. There's no fooling you." And that story still sticks with me. One of the students came back to visit every day her 3rd grade year, and I was wearing a Phillies shirt. It was during a not so great time in Phillies baseball. And she came into the classroom, and I was wearing my Philly shirt. She was wearing her Manheim Township soccer shirt, and I said, "That's a good team you got on there." She goes, "Me? Yes. You?" And she pointed back and up and down at my jersey, and she goes, "Not so much." So this group, and so many more stories of their humor come to mind, and I'm not going to take up too much more time during this intro. But I'm very excited to see this group as they walk through the building for the last time before they graduate, just because of what the joy they brought to my life. All my classes brought joy for different reasons, right? All of them. I remember all of my classes for different reasons, all 8 classes that I had. This one I remember for going with me through a very stressful journey in the early part of my adulthood, but also for the laughs that they brought to my life every single day. So to the class of 2023, you're loved and you matter. No matter where you go in life, you'll be successful. And I'm appreciative to be part of your journey, but more so appreciate the laugh, the love, and the lessons that you brought to my story as well. So good luck to you all. I look forward to seeing all the amazing things that you do in the future. I love each and every one of you. Go get them, guys. Go get them. All right, so that'll lead us into our episode. As I said, we have Jaimie Beebe coming on to the show. She has her own podcast that explores true crime. She is a casting director, and she owns her own line of bikinis, which we'll get into on this show as well as I introduce her. So without further ado, I appreciate so much her grace, and I'm so happy that we finally get to have this episode and this conversation together. Let's explore the story of Jaimie Beebe. All right, everyone, welcome into the Prequel studio, and I am so honored to be joined by not only a casting director, not only the host of the podcast Strictly Stalking, not only the founder, CEO of Boyfriend Bikini, but a world traveler straight off the boat from Mexico. Jaimie Beebe, welcome to the Prequel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, so happy to have you here. I feel like I probably need an entire other podcast to like list all of the things that you do, Jaimie.
Yeah, I kind of try to do everything. Everything that pops in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just try that. Some works, some doesn't.
Right, and I feel like when I look at and say the things that you've already done, all of them scream out, right? As someone who's trying to get a podcast up and running, you've been doing Strictly Stalking for how long now?
3 years. We launched it January of 2020.
Was there even a time before COVID?
I know, right?
Tell us a little bit about Strictly Stalking. Tell us what kind of brought you to doing that. What is the show and how has it evolved? And kind of talk us through the whole experience.
Sure. I mean, I love true crime. Like I used to write to prisoners when I was in high school. Until my mom found out. And, it's interesting, I was just so captivated by it, so they're in prison, I could just write to them, and it was before internet, so it took me a minute, but I found addresses, and I started writing, and gave them my home address. Needless to say, my parents were not happy with that, but it continued. I mean, not that part, but my love of true crime continued. I think it's just because it's so interesting to me how people can do these things that, I probably wouldn't do. I say probably, right. You never know. That I probably wouldn't do. And I love podcasts. And so I was listening to a ton of podcasts, and I called my business partner one day, and I was like, I really want to do this, the best murder podcast out there, but all the murders are taken. There's no murders left. Every murder out there has done. 5 podcast episodes about it. Even boring murders have podcasts about it, And he's like, well, you don't have to do murder. No one's doing a podcast about stalking. And I was like, I don't even know what stalking is. That's dumb. I'm not going to do that. And then I hung up on him because it can be very dramatic. It's my process. And then after I hung up on him, of course, he's very logical and he thinks about things, where I'm more I just do things. And so I started researching stalking and stalkers, and because the only thing I knew was John Lennon's stalker killed him, but was he really stalking him? Who knows? I didn't really know anything about it. So I started researching, and I was like, wow, there is this whole entire crime that I don't know anything about. And it's a pretty horrific crime. I mean, not that makes it cool, but it's wow, how can all this be happening to so many people, and I never hear about it. So that kind of pushed us into let's try this and raise awareness and see what happens. And as soon as we started, and hearing people's stories, and we were just wow, how is nothing being done? Nothing's done. Even sometimes when, it does get to the point where someone's physically injured, the person still barely goes to jail or gets a slap on the wrist, or it's insane. It's absolutely nuts. So for the podcast, we decided our format would be to interview survivors of stalking. And so, there's lots of trigger warnings on our podcast, because stalkers come in all forms. That's something that we really try to show. It's like we've had people, their moms stalk them, their dad, their brother, sister, aunt, and uncle. I mean, any type of family member, strangers, somebody, the guy at the bank, your ex-boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, someone you dated in high school stalks you 20 years later. Wow. It can literally be anyone at all. It's nuts. So that's kind of how we started, and then we kept going because we started seeing changes come about from the awareness, and realized that we have so many people that reach out to us and they're like, oh, I didn't know where to turn, I didn't know what to do until I heard your podcast, which is super cool. Hopefully we're helping people. But it's true, like, what do you do if you're being stalked? Like, do you call 911 and say that your ex-boyfriend left flowers at your door? Like, oh no. But there are ways to do that. You have to explain the fear involved in that and why they shouldn't be leaving those flowers, things like that. So we're trying to kind of educate people on how to get help, but then also hopefully in the process, we're working towards better training for cops and first responders.
That's what I was going to ask. Have you worked with any, law enforcement in that regard on what you've learned, and like, are you taking that out and about to them so that they're able to help on the forefront of this and even be more proactive?
We're trying. Most police officers only have a couple hours of domestic violence training throughout their career, and they put stalking in with that, which is fine, I guess, like, in a way, because a lot of domestic violence and stalking does go together. So you're talking like their career, and they get like a couple hours of training on that. So we kind of need to back up and start from the very beginning of how the police officers are trained. It's not necessarily their fault when they don't know what to do with someone that's being stalked. Mm-hmm. Police officers are brought in after a crime has been committed. Like, you find a dead body, you call the cops, right? Right. Like, you got stabbed, you call the cops. And they're used to that. They follow the clues, they arrest the people. To put it simply, like Law and Order. So with stalking, it's like, here are all the clues, here's what's happening, but then it's like, you have to form this proof and the fear factor of it all, and it's just a whole different world that they're not used to.
Yeah, and I'd assume, as you mentioned, yes, there's a heavy percentage of it is through the domestic portion, right? But you mentioned parents, and you mentioned cousins, or someone from high school. So that wasn't part of my thought process as you were talking prior to that statement. So I'd also imagine that the stories you've heard come with there's a lot of trauma. But have you experienced afterward, after interviewing people who have survived stalking, that they come back and say, wow, what a difference that made for me to speak to that? Has that been some of the feedback you've gotten?
We hear that over and over, because stalking isn't really talked about, and it's kind of along the realm of, like, people don't talk about rape, they don't talk about domestic violence, they don't talk about stalking, and it's kind of all in that. And once you let it out and once you start talking about it, it does lift a weight off your shoulders. And a lot of the people that come on our podcast are anonymous, for safety, because stalkers don't just randomly stop stalking you unless they're in prison or dead. Or sometimes if they find somebody else, but that's kind of the only way you stop a lot of times. And so, yeah, I mean, I forgot the question now.
Just their experience being able to talk with you. And
yeah, so once they're able to start talking about it, like, it really helps, and it helps them also feel like they can help other people.
Right. And I think that's probably really empowering for them. And you doing this podcast and giving them that outlet for them to be able to turn that back around and help others. That must feel really good from your end to know that you're giving. So like when I think about this show, my goal in this show is to allow for people to come and tell their stories and just share their passions and how they came to that decision that this is what they were going to do. Your vision, your path is giving people that outlet to work through really significant trauma and a tough experience. So that's a pretty badass thing that you're doing, Jaimie. Like, in all honesty, at the end of the day, it's a pretty badass thing. But it's not like your only badass thing that you do. Like, you're also this casting director. I just need to know, how cool is the job of being a casting director?
It's pretty cool. It's not as cool, I think, as people think.
Fair.
I mean,
Fair.
I mostly just talk to agents and managers. I don't really get to... I mean, I know a lot of actors and stuff, but I don't really get to, like, go approach, you know, my actor friends, or I don't call Brad Pitt. I would love to call Brad Pitt, let me tell you. But
wouldn't we all, Jaimie? Wouldn't we all?
I know. Be like, come on over. No, I just deal with agents and managers most of the time, and some are great and some are not as great. But what's really cool about doing the casting is, like, kind of, because I come in at the very, very beginning of a production. You know, you can't really do much without the cast. You can't shoot anything. So I come in at the beginning when the ideas are all forming and everyone's really excited and everything. And then, you know, we find these people and, you know, I've read the script, I've done all that. And then I kind of, you know, get everybody in there and then I exit. And then I come back at the end and watch the project. And it's so cool just to see, like, from the very beginning, you know, to the final project.
You're like the bookmarker.
Cool. Yeah.
Like the bookmarker, like you kind of get to track it from the outside. Tell me the story about how you got here, right? So what brought you into the casting director world? What was your journey to being there? And sort of like your experience through it, like talk about some of the shows or movies or things that you've casted, but ultimately, like, what got you here?
Sure. So I graduated high school and didn't know what to do. So I ended up following, I wanted to follow the dead, but Jerry died the year I graduated high school. So I followed Fish Tour and a couple other random tours for a little while. Ran out of money in a college town in Ohio University, and my dad was like, my parents are both college professors. So my dad was like, you have to go to school. Like, you can't just, you know, do this with your life. Like, you have to go to college. So I was like, okay, well, I'm out of money and I'm in this town, so like, I'll just go to college here. And I chose to get my bachelor's degree in photography because I just thought it would be the easiest thing. I really didn't want to go to school, you know. I just wanted to, like, try cool shit and, like, you know, I don't know, run around the world. But my parents wanted me to go to school, so I got a degree in photography. And then the year I graduated, I swear, like, a month later, digital photography came out. And so I was like, well, what's that? Like, first I was like, well, no one's going to use that. That's dumb. And then within, like, minutes, my degree was obsolete because I mostly just learned how to, you know, develop film and
right.
You know, my heart was never in it, like, creative-wise, so I was like, cool, like, I'll just be, like, a film developer. I'm not sure what I was thinking. I just figured it would be easy. So I graduated, and then I tried to travel around a little bit more. Again, ran out of money. And I ended up in Chicago, and I met a guy. That's how it always sounds.
It's how it always starts.
It does. I met a guy, and he was super great. He wanted to be a rock star. And I worry that he would listen. He was a great musician. It didn't work out for him. But I really wanted to help him. So I went back to school and I got my master's degree in music management. Because I was like, well, you know, because I mean, love in the eyes. I was like, this boy is going to be the biggest rock star ever. I don't want him to leave me behind. So I'm going to manage his band. You know, I'm like
nice.
That kind of girl.
Yes.
So I get my master's degree, move out to LA. It didn't work out. We tried. And also I was like, I don't want to manage bands. Like, this is like babysitting grown men, and this is not for me.
It's not an easy job, Jaimie. That's not an easy job.
You know, I just don't have the patience to, like, some of the phone calls I would no way. Like, the last thing I want to do is babysit an adult, you know? And so I was like, not going to do that. I got into like every other job you could probably imagine. I sold houses. I took classes at at this magic castle place so that I could become a magician.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, I was like, I'll just do this today. Like, I would wake up with a new idea of what to do with my life. And then, you know, me and the guy, we had broken up, and I met a new guy. That's how it always starts again. And he was in, you know, entertainment production, and he'd been an actor as a child, which should have been a red flag. But he was no longer acting. He wanted to be a director. So he's like, well, I'm going to start this production company, and you can run it. I'm like, awesome, for sure. Like, I've never been on a set. I didn't even know a casting director was a thing. I have no idea, right? So luckily there's internet. So I just kind of like, I taught myself everything I possibly could. And hired the right people that knew what they were doing, and I could like watch and learn, and worked at that company for a little while. It did okay until me and him weren't doing okay. And then I left, and I was like, well, casting was the easiest part of my whole job, because everyone likes the casting director. You know, I'm like bringing good news. I'm like, yeah, you got the job. Hey, I need a self-tape, like whatever it is. So I'm like, that's the job I want. So everyone has to be nice to me. Like, you know. So I started, I thought I would just automatically get casting jobs, but I didn't. It's very difficult to break in the industry. So I started in reality, in unscripted. And morally, it was difficult. Like, there's a lot that goes on reality shows. And it's like you're taking some 18-year-old, 20-year-old kid from like West Virginia who just wants to be famous because he, you know, lives in a trailer park and sees it and watches social media and thinks that fame will get him better or whatever it is. And then, you know, he ends up a drug addict, an alcoholic, suicide, homicide. You know, it really puts people into a different place where it doesn't work for them. So I worked in reality shows for quite a while. And then in the meantime, what I was doing, because I didn't want to work under anyone, but I wanted to be in movies and TV. I wanted to do scripted. So I would go to the schools, the universities, and I would stand outside and I would ask the kids, like, hey, do you need a casting director? Like, I'll cast your movie or whatever. Because a lot of times they would hire me and they'd give me like $100 or something, which is like nothing. But what would happen is, you know, when they started graduating, they would continue to hire me. So I was able to not only kind of learn with them more, but, you know, I was able to get my relationships with agents and managers. And then, you know, they were getting bigger jobs because they were graduating and they were bringing me along, and then word of mouth. And that's kind of how I got to where I'm at.
Wow. What a journey! I mean, I do have to ask, and if you can't answer, that's fine. Tell us about some of the shows that you have. I know you said reality. Which shows have you done for the listening audience here?
Gosh, it'd probably be like, which ones haven't I done? I've done every like dating show, like.
Oh, wow.
Dating, Naked and Afraid, all the Survivor shows, Homestead Rescue, Bar Rescue, Big Brother, all the island people.
I got you.
I don't even know half of the names. And then, you know, when I finally just left reality, I think I was trying to find like, was like 13 and pregnant, and I was just like, I can't do it anymore. Like, I'm exploiting a pregnant 13-year-old. Right. You know, I think I was like in an interview with this girl, and I was like, oh, okay, so like, do you know who the daddy is? She's like, and she basically was like, oh, could be my dad's friend. And I'm like, oh God, I can't do this anymore. You know, so hard. That was kind of the end for me. I'll do I will cast a reality show once in a while if it's not like that.
Right.
If it's not anything that I'm at a point where I can turn things down. So if I don't feel like it's morally okay or something that I would want to see, then
you can step away. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my dream, Jaimie, is to be on a game show. Have you ever done any game show casting?
Tons of them.
Have you?
I mean, I've cast them. I haven't done them.
I hear you. I need to get on a game show, Jaimie. This is like the life goal that I have, is to be on a game show. Yes, I don't know why. I've always, Family Feud's been a big one for me for a long time. I think it's because I grew up with, a family who loved, my grandmother loved game shows. $100,000 Pyramid was her thing. So...
I mean, if you were going to do anything, I'd say game shows are, your best bet for, still... staying a real person afterwards.
I've actually been really into this Netflix. I guess it's a reality show. It's got the mix of a game in it. It's called The Circle. I've been really into that recently.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I've heard about it.
I've been really, really into it because the whole way you build relationships through social media is wild to me. So I've been really interested in that. That dynamic in that show. And I said to my wife the other night, I was like, Andrea, I think I'm going to apply. And she said, no, stop. You're not going to apply to be on The Circle. I still might. I think it's a conversation that we just have to have.
I mean, I haven't seen it, so I can't tell. The only thing that I would tell people, and probably no one in reality will ever hire me again, but if it's a show where there's going to be alcohol and you drink alcohol, you probably shouldn't be on the show.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, so The Circle is not that. You're basically in your own room, your own apartment for, I don't know, they make it sound like a month or so. And you only communicate to people via social media. It's basically an instant messenger.
So with how I live now.
Right. But the thing is, you don't ever meet them until the end. So you don't know if they're catfishing you or not, which is, so you have to build this trust and build connections with people. It's super interesting living in the world that we live in, but also knowing that these people never meet until after they've gone through this whole process.
Maybe
so
check it out.
Check it out, Jaimie. You might like it. You might say, Mike, go do it. And if that's the case, then I'm going to tell Andrea.
That doesn't sound as bad as when we put people on an island and give them their weight in alcohol every day and tell them
just
to get naked.
See what happens. Yeah, exactly.
What happens. It's okay if you're naked. Those shows, I think people probably shouldn't go on.
Right. And I think that's from your stance and your perspective and your experience, that's very fair advice.
And they're fun to watch.
I mean, listen, I will tell you that I spent the first, I don't know, decade of my time with my wife. We watched The Bachelor every single week. So
yeah, I mean, I love watching people have a complete disaster on TV. I think it's great. I'm you're worse than me. It's great, but I know the after effects.
Yeah. That, and again, it goes back to that trauma that we talked about in a different way with your podcast. There's got to be trauma that they experience through that especially younger. You talked about the 13-year-old on 13 and pregnant, and I think in any of these shows that I've watched, some of the things that they go through, I sit there and I feel for them. This is on camera, and they're having an emotional breakdown, and there's trauma in that, and then having to come away from that, because I think in our most vulnerable moments, Jaimie, it might be us and our best friend on FaceTime.
Right.
For these people and their kids, it's them and the entire world watching it.
Yeah. Well, and you have to remember too that when that's happening, they probably haven't slept. They never get enough sleep. They have been drunk for days or are currently drunk or whatever it might be. They're stressed out. They're in a place they haven't been. If they're in one of those mansions or whatever, they're in a new place. All those stressors add to that breakdown, and that's what people want to see.
Right. Yes, and for us from the outside to watch it, and they know that we don't. Not everybody has that insight. Like I don't think I would have thought that until now, Jaimie. Like I think I see them having drinks, and but I don't often realize they're not sleeping or that they might have had another conversation that we don't have the context to.
That too. It's a lot of editing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lot of snipping in there. In there. So I gotta ask you before we turn to another endeavor of yours. You talked through your journey to getting to the casting director point, and you had a lot of like stops along the way. What's a lesson that you take away from that whole journey, from going to college after you kind of followed bands around a little bit, and then leaving and realizing photography is not going to happen, all the way till this point? Do you have a lesson that you kind of took away from that whole experience, that part of your prequel?
I have a few.
Name as many as you need.
And everybody's different, but I think for me, I wish that I would have just like stayed single for like until I was 40. I mean, I'm still single. I'm 45, so I'm not sure if I'm doing this wrong, but no, I think especially like as women, and I grew up in the Midwest, I was always under the impression where like, okay, I have to go find someone and like I don't know, like make them marry me and have a child, and it didn't work. Like I just kept dating these idiots, especially the last one, and it's like and it's really like it like internally is so weird. It's like something that I kind of have to fight against. And I can now. Like, I'm so happy. Like, I can wake up and do whatever the heck I want to do all day and, like, go travel. I've no one that... Okay, I check in with my parents twice a day because they worry about me. But in reality, I can wear whatever I want. I can talk to whoever I want. I can literally leave tonight on a plane if I want, and I don't have to even tell anybody. And I just never got that... experience so much when I was younger, I guess, because I was always trying to like find that guy that would marry me or something. Right. And it just really like it pulled me down. It pulled me back, and I think that I would have experienced so much more, especially professionally, if I hadn't been held down, because I feel also like I was always trying to help these guys. Like that's how I got into every business. Like, okay, yeah, I'll do this for you. And I ended up doing all the work, which is great. I learned it and left. But, it's always been that. Every single guy I've dated, I'm like, okay, well, like, let's start this business. And I end up doing it all and giving him all the credit. So, like, that shit is over. Like, everything is mine. But, I think that I would have stood up for myself more, and I would have stayed single. And I think I would have thought about things a little bit more before... Maybe not thought about him more before jumping in, but like, I mean, I just had no idea. I still have no idea what I want to do. Like, I'm trying to start something new right now, Like, every day I'm like, maybe I could do this for my life, and I'm 45, So I don't know, like, I'm not sure where to go with that. I just kind of go with the wind on that, but definitely just stay single and stand up for myself is what I would have done differently.
I like that, and I think, you talked a little bit about... the idea of this is what I thought. This is, I grew up here. This is the box that that I fit in and I'm supposed to be. But, breaking out of it now, like you clearly have like all of the things that you're doing. It's so cool to hear you talk about your experiences, starting the podcast, going through and being a successful casting director. But I do think the thing that struck me so much as I was, reading about you and your experiences was starting your company, the Boyfriend Bikini. Can you tell us about Boyfriend Bikini first, and then we'll get into how it came about.
So it is a bikini company, and we sell bikinis. It's called I guess I kind of have to start at the beginning to explain it.
That's fine. You can do that.
So again, with the guys, I was in a really abusive relationship for many years. And it's very difficult to leave an abusive relationship, especially, depending on finances, like there's so many reasons. And many women try to leave and keep going back. And that's what I did for a long time. And then February of, I think it was actually Valentine's Day of 2020, I did finally get out. Actually, I made him get out because I own the house.
Good for you.
But I finally made him get out. And thankfully, because of COVID, that's the only reason I think that I was able to, it was like the perfect storm, because I think that if I had stayed with him during COVID, I probably wouldn't be alive. So many women lost their lives during COVID due to domestic violence, and children too, because, they didn't have the outside influence. They didn't, they were stuck at home. Stresses were high. So anyway, so back to the bikinis. So he always used to just, he really brought me down. He was a really terrible person. And one time I was like, oh, I really want to have a bikini company. I think that would be so cool. And he's like, you can't do that. You're too dumb. You can't do that. Okay, so fast forward to, there was a lot he told me I couldn't do, which I've done it all since then. In the last 3 years, I've done so fucking much.
Good for you.
I've traveled the entire world alone. I went skydiving. I got my scuba license. I mean, name it, I've done it. I crashed a motorcycle in Nicaragua off a cliff.
Not good. You're good. You're okay, so that's okay. But not good that it crashed.
Exactly. But one of those things that was always kind of on my mind was that bikini company that he told me I couldn't do. And it kind of started where I was like, okay, I'm going to just make a bikini for myself. Build it all and do this one amazing bikini for myself, because I travel so much in usually tropical areas, and I couldn't find the exact bikini I wanted. So I found this girl in Paris, and she helped me with the pattern and stuff. And then I found, then I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I might as well go all the way. I'm just going to do it. And I found a manufacturer in Bali, and I went to Bali, and, because I wanted to make sure it was ethically produced and everything, and got it produced. And then in the meantime, I called one of my girlfriends, and I was like, I'm going to name it the ex-boyfriend, and ha on him. And, it was coming from a really negative place. Yeah. But I couldn't really notice that, because I was excited, but I was still bringing myself down. And so my girlfriend was like, why would you do something that you've dreamt about for so long and then name it such a negative thing and put that negativity on it? I was like, shit, you're right. So then I turned it around. I liked the idea of it, but I wanted to turn it around and make it more positive. So I called it the Boyfriend Bikini. And then each style or color is named after type of guy, mostly positive. Some of them are more funny, but they're kind of all named after somebody that I've encountered in my life, on a positive note, I named one after my dad, but it's called Daddy Issues because that's cute, and this guy I have this insane crush on right now. I named it Emotionally Unavailable because he is, but he's still an amazing dude, and I hope he doesn't hear this, but because I don't know what that's all about, but
I'll try and keep it away from you. I'll do my best, Jaimie.
but he's taught me a lot. He's probably one of the first guys that's just been completely genuinely kind, upfront, just solid all around. He's not available for me, but he's shown me a lot of the things that I need to look for. So kind of guys that taught me things and helped me out along the way. And then part of the proceeds goes to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, because, again, turning that around from my ex and making it into something positive.
I think that is, there's not a part of that story that doesn't give me goosebumps, honestly. I want to say thank you for that work. I've known people who have gone through that struggle and who have come to me when they're at their lowest point, and I will say to them, so what is it that's holding you back? And they can never put their finger on it. So I know by listening to your story and how you've broken through that wall and turned everything. I love. I mean, I've looked at the website. I love it, and my wife's now. She's gonna. But I'm ordering one for her. For our trip from there, and she's gonna listen to this and know, but that's fine, no big deal. But because I love so much what it stands for, and all of the things that you have accomplished since then, and I appreciate so much your vulnerability in sharing that part of your story. I know that
I think it's really important for women to share that, and it's hard. Like when I first. Honestly, the reason I started sharing it more was because of my podcast. Because I would get so triggered. I would shut down during the interviews that I was doing because so many people are talking about domestic violence. And I would just be like, cold. People were like, she's so cold on the podcast. But that wasn't it. Like, I was terrified to speak. And then I realized, like, I'm all these people are being vulnerable and they're coming forward and talking with me. Like, I need to open up and talk about it too. And when I first started talking about it, like, I'd be at a party and be like, so my ex-boyfriend used to hit me a lot, and people would just be like, what the fuck? Yeah. But I've learned, and I think that it's a learned thing on how to talk about trauma. And it's not easy, but I think that, like, through therapy and stuff, it helps to talk about it openly and honestly. At better times than sometimes, which I had to kind of learn. Because, like, once it started coming out, I was just like, hey, guess what, people? Like, first date, I'd be like, and then. And guys were like, oh, my God, I'm getting away, So it took a little bit of time to kind of learn how to do it in a positive, productive way.
I think, Well, it helps because I talk about my own trauma. We were actually talking about some of mine before we started, and but I think what it also does, and you've lent the conversation to this a little bit already, is it gives the person listening that mindset of I'm not alone, and I think that really matters because sometimes they won't come forward and say something because they do feel like they're the only one. And they do feel like now they're weak because they're the only person this happens to. And that's just not the case. So people like you who are out there and expressing this and talking about it and being real and vulnerable and raw, give them that look in the mirror like, all right, well, if Jaimie went through this and she's thriving with all these other things, I can too. I just need to break away. And I credit you for being able to do that.
Well, and people hide it so well. I mean, every time I posted a photo with my ex, I would hashtag best boyfriend ever. People had no idea I was just crying 10 minutes before that photo. Like, wow. You know what I mean? Like, everything was a lie. And people saw it and didn't understand that they could speak up. So I think that's kind of why I really started talking about it more because, I mean, people knew, or they thought they knew, but, like, how do you approach that, Right. So
Right. It is a real, it was only brought to me by a couple of people who had gone through it, and I wouldn't have known otherwise. I had met the person, I'd met the significant other, and I would have never in a million years.
We get so good at hiding it.
It blew my mind, but you're right. I didn't know how to help other than listen and say, what do you need from me? And sometimes what I wanted them to say wasn't what they said. I wanted them to say, take me to the police or something like that.
Yeah,
and that wasn't it wasn't what they were ready for. They just wanted someone to talk to.
Well, and it's really hard to go to the police in that situation. I remember one time I actually went to the police station. And I sat in there for 5 hours and cried, and then I left. Because I had to go through everything in my mind, and I was like, if I tell on him, then he's going to be more mad.
Yeah.
And, like, that could push him over the edge,
Right.
And so I chose not to, just because, like, I was so scared of him. And because the laws, like, if I had told on him, they maybe would have, like, arrested him overnight. He probably would have bailed out within an hour and been home.
Right.
And that happens. So you have to think about that. Like, what are you going to do when he comes home in an hour?
And the cycle continues, right?
Yeah.
And probably a worse version of it.
Yeah.
I am so happy that you decided that you were going to put your foot in the ground and walk out in February because I'm so happy that...
I celebrate every Valentine's Day.
Do you?
And
good for you.
Actually, that's when I launched my bikini company, was this year on Valentine's Day, for that reason.
I mean, I think just being able to have this conversation with you and know the great things that you're doing as a result of what you experienced, I'm grateful that you're here and that what you said would have happened during that COVID time did not happen to you. Because
it happened to a lot of women.
The world needs more Jaimies. So
I think so too. I'd like to find one and date one. I think I'm amazing. I was thinking about that, like, what am I looking for in a guy? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm just looking for me.
For me, another version of me. Exactly.
Like,
so let's get on that.
And, like, a little bit of my dog. I'm good, you
know? Let's just I'll get a scientist on here next. We'll clone Jaimie Beebe. That'll be our next step for the Prequel podcast. We'll find Jaimie so that, you know, we can reinvent her and have you date her. So I do want to say once again, thank you for the work that you're doing. I think it's amazing that you're giving back to a community that needs more spotlight shined on it right now, so that people feel comfortable, feel like they have a brave space to lean into. And I hope that this podcast, if anybody who's listening is struggling in that world of their relationship, use Jaimie's experience as an example for how to move forward and use whatever you're going through now in a positive way for yourself and for others, because right here I'm talking to a living, breathing example of overcoming, and I appreciate your vulnerability in the conversation, Jaimie. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I will ask you then one last question before I have you share where we can all find you and follow you and live your journey through travel and through just all of these great things that you're doing. I want to ask just one more thing, which is, what advice would you give to people as they move through their stories, through their prequels? I love some of the things you've said already about standing up for yourself, doing
now
the
you
things
know why
that
I'm
people...
like, stay single.
Doing the things that people say you can't do. I love all that. But if you could take one thing and say to the listening audience, like, this is what I would tell you to do with your life, what would that be?
I guess just do what makes you happy. Whether it's going to make someone else happy or not is kind of irrelevant, as long as you're not hurting anyone. Like, when I wasn't happy for a long time, I used to wake up and look in the mirror and I'd practice smiling so that I could get it right, because I was really down for a long time. And after a while I was like, oh my God, I'm literally practicing smiling in the mirror. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it started working. I mean, you can't sit there and smile at yourself in the mirror and not feel kind of happier. So I think, like, whatever it takes to feel that, like, happiness, whether it's smiling at yourself in front of the mirror, laughing at yourself, getting a puppy, leaving the country, you know, starting a business, whatever it is, like, just within yourself, I think, like, that's what you need to do.
I love that. I hear practice smiling, and I immediately went through my head, no one should have to practice smiling. And I think what you're saying is so relevant in a really difficult time. Everybody's got their stuff, you know, everybody's got struggles, everybody's got their things. I often said to teachers at the building that I was a principal at, I want you to take some time, either this weekend, this month, do the one thing in your life that brings you joy, that brings you the purest joy. I don't care what it is. If it's a bubble bath, if it's baseball, if it's golf, you want to pour something into your cup, that's your business. Whatever you want to do, whatever brings you the purest joy, do it. And then come back and give everything you got. Because I think...
You'd be surprised how much it works to practice smiling. Like, when
really?
You're like, I can't get out of bed, I can't stop crying. But I promised myself I would practice smiling in the mirror, because, like, I don't want to have to go out and look like an idiot when I can't smile correctly. I don't know what I was thinking, but it worked. Like, it's really hard to sit there and practice smiling and not feel a little bit better.
Right. I'm glad it worked for you. I just want you to be purely happy and have your purest joy. I want that for I want that for everybody. I want that for everybody, and I certainly think what you're doing is lending itself to a future where people can do that. So I want to ask, just where can we find you? Where can we follow you? Where can we find you? How can we buy the bikinis for our, for ourselves and for others?
Sure. I'm on Instagram. My personal Instagram is feathergirl77. And then my podcast Instagram is Strictly Stalking Pod. And you can find the podcast anywhere that you listen to podcasts, Strictly Stalking. And then my bikini Instagram is the Boyfriend Bikini, which is also the website. And there's like ways to click on the Instagram or the website, and then you can buy the bikinis. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Awesome. Well, Jaimie, thank you so much for your patience and your flexibility in making this happen. I already mentioned to the audience that it took us a few tries, and that is totally on me and all of my stuff. But I'm so grateful that we were able to finally get this recorded and ready for the people who listen. So thanks again for coming on and spending some time with us, and we'll be following your journey for sure. So keep doing all the great things that you're doing, Jaimie.
Thank you.
What a great time I had talking to Jaimie. She is just a ball of energy, has so many fun anecdotes. I love her experiences. I just travel now. That is the goal. That's the dream. Can you imagine that lifestyle? So cool. But I think, throughout everything we talked about, there were so many takeaways. I love the space that she's giving to victim survivors of stalking. I think that she's right. It's just not a conversation that we have, but it is scary to consider that does occur, and people's lives are in danger as a result of that. So the space she's giving to people to work through their stories and their trauma is very admirable. And I said that while we were here, but I want to reiterate that. And to be able to process that with people is very challenging. To be able to process any trauma with anybody is incredibly challenging. So I credit her for taking the time to do that and giving the space for others to do that. I really took from this conversation to not put yourself in a box because other people say that you belong there. She talked about her ex and the way that he treated her. And it really struck me that, she's broken out of that box. She's broken a mold that was created for her. And I have so much respect for her ability to break out of that mold and to take a negative situation and turn it into a positive outcome for others. She's turned it into a positive outcome for herself, right? She's had quite a journey in her life, all the way up to the casting director component of her world. Listening to her story, she mentioned that throughout that time, she did things because of others, and she didn't always do them for herself. And now she is. So don't put yourself in a box. When you're writing your story, let your story expand itself. Don't get trapped in that comfort for others or fear of others. Really break out of that box and become who you want to be. Stand up for yourself. Don't listen to the voices and the naysayers saying you can't do this. You're not built to do this. It's not possible for you. Because she had someone saying that you can't create, you can't design bikinis, and now she does. Go to boyfriendbikini.com while I got your attention on that. Not just because that's her, that's her business and she was just on the podcast, but because of the messaging behind it. She broke out of the box. She didn't listen. She stood up for herself. And she's doing what makes her happy, bouncing off of something that didn't. What I hear from her and what I took away from this is that we are going to absolutely have these moments in our stories, in our prequels, that are there to break us down. There are going to be people, there are going to be experiences, there are going to be places in our journeys that are there You can hear my dog. This is like the first time Maverick's made an appearance. And this is not a great time, Mav. This was a big moment. But there are going to be these moments that try and break us down. That's their goal in these stories. But to write the complete version of your story, keep pushing. Break out of the box. Overcome that. Stand up for yourself. Do what makes you happy. Don't listen to the negative noise. And if you get stuck in the negative noise, talk to me. I'll help you break out of it. I love that stuff. But I want to again thank Jaimie. I took so much away from her conversation, and I will say, Jaimie, I had a rough incident after baseball tonight, and I went home and I practiced smiling, and you were right, it did work. So I appreciate that. So if you ever need to, go ahead and practice smiling. It makes you feel better to see yourself smile. All right, y'all. Once again, make sure that you're following Jaimie where all of the places that she mentioned during the episode. I do want to say one more thing. I appreciate her vulnerability in sharing with us the domestic violence that she suffered at the hands of her ex. And I do want to tell you that if you're listening to this and you are in that same space or in that same situation, to ask for help. To ask for help. There are hotlines, there are websites. The National Domestic Violence Hotline number is 800-799-7233. No one deserves to be treated in such a way. You all have value. You're all loved and you all matter. Don't let that be part of your story. If it becomes part of your story, end that chapter and end it quickly. And if you need help, make sure you call that number. Once again, Jaimie, I appreciate you so much. And if you're ever casting a game show, you know where to find me. For those of you who are following or not following me, make sure that you click subscribe on the YouTube channel below. I'd love to keep building the subscriptions and this podcast as much as I can so that our stories are getting out there. You can follow me at www.mikeazalina.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike Azalina. You can follow me on TikTok at Mike Azalina5, on Instagram at AzalinaM, or you can follow me on Facebook, Mike Azalina. But make sure that you click subscribe here. Go subscribe, follow on all your podcast platforms. Leave a rating and a description for why you enjoyed the show. I'd love to hear from you. Any kind of comment, any kind of value you can add to this, I would appreciate. All right, y'all. Remember, go live out your story. Make it a great one. And while you're at it, make somebody else's great too. You are loved and you matter. I appreciate you listening, and I'll see you next time. Much love.